What do they know? That sounded like a nice crack.
That was.
I had the Rona.
Oh.
Which is why we didn't get an episode
yeah.
out last week.
Yeah.
Because I tested positive and was like, fuck this noise, I'm going to bed. So I've been on and off day Quill and NyQuil and all sorts of quills all week. Doing much better now. Feeling much better. I got a little spring in my step.
Good to hear it.
But yeah, it was a pretty chill week, just hanging out, quarantining away from work. I watched all 3 Hobbit movies, the extended versions, for the first time. I recently bought all 3 extended.
Very nice.
You know,
and what
I'm
are your
in the
thoughts
camp.
on that?
Well, I'm in the camp that I don't hate those movies. I enjoy them. I feel like they're just a fun ride. Yeah, it definitely has its issues. Don't get me wrong, but for me, the Hobbit is a good opus of the Middle Earth. It's a good story set in Middle Earth that doesn't feel as heavy. Like if you just wanted to like enjoy that world and its characters, but I feel like Lord of the Rings is such a heavy trilogy. It has such a heavy storyline with the ring and Sauron and the emotion of Sam and Frodo and Merry and Pippin and everybody. It just feels heavy. Yeah. It's a heavy story versus the Hobbit. It's more lighthearted, a little more goofy, a little more comedy. And it just, so I like that world. I like Peter Jackson and what he did with the world and the feeling and how people interact and the aesthetics, the cinematography. So I like to pop on the Hobbit once in a while. And so I've watched the original Hobbit movies a few times, but I recently bought the extended versions. And I can say that the first 2 are, I think, really solid. They added a bunch of scenes that, were originally taken out for the for obvious for good reason, but put back in definitely just like the extended versions of the first trilogy. Help that world just fill it in a little bit more. Especially, we get a lot of talk about Thorin and his heritage, and we hear a lot about his grandfather, but there's a little bit about his daddy, Thrain. Yeah, Thrain. And so the second one, Desolation of Smaug, like gives that whole story, and you actually like meet Thrain and like characters interact with him, and he actually has a story. Mm-hmm. It ends very surreptitiously and shittily, but it still works. But the third one, the Battle of Five Armies, the extended version of that was just bad. Like shit was taken out, and it needs to stay out. It's so bad. But I do like my favorite is they brought in a lot of the songs that were cut. There's a lot of songs in the books that people don't realize. And the Hobbit did a good job with the first movie having 2 songs. Bend the Forks, a nice little jaunty tune during dinner, and then
during cleanup.
During the cleanup song, and then they're Over the Misty Mountains by the Dwarves, which is one of my favorite Howard Shore compositions of all time. And they put in a bunch more, which was cool. So they added a few more songs into the extended version. So that was fun. I enjoyed it. It was fun to watch, but the third one just...
Yeah, as you know, I'm a pretty big fan of Guillermo del Toro and his filmmaking style. And he was, of course, going to be the original filmmaker behind the Hobbit movies, chosen by Peter Jackson to do it. Peter Jackson did not want to do the Hobbit. He felt like because the books were different, the book was different from the Lord of the Rings series in tone, vibe, everything. Like the Hobbit is much more kid friendly. He wanted somebody else to direct it, to give it their own unique vision, still be within Lord of the Rings, but give it his own version of it.
Let somebody else take it.
Just like Tolkien did because he had a... Sorry, I'm messing with my audio a little bit.
The quizzical look is where you're going with
okay,
this.
So like Tolkien, he wrote The Hobbit as he was, telling stories to his kids when they were little, and he published the book in 1938. And the first the Fellowship of the Ring did not get published until I think it was 1951 or 52. So there's a good
early
there's
50s,
a good 13, 14 year chunk between
including a world war
between the first, like, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. The world changed. Tolkien's view of the world changed, and his message towards the world was
he was
different.
a World War I.
He was a World War I vet, and then he watched the Hobbit, which he had written as he was telling these stories to his children, who grew up in the 20s and 30s. They were starting to go off and fight in the war after he had been a soldier in the first war, and so he had a completely new perspective, not only as a former soldier but as the parent of soldiers. And so this the world had changed and it got darker for him. And so I think that the Hobbit movies just would have benefited, first of all, by being 2 movies or 1 movie, just one long movie.
2 movies. I think 2 movies would have done it better.
Or do just one epic 4-hour movie, pull a Dr. Zhivago or pull a Hamlet, do the full thing, do a full opus, do a break in the middle.
You kidding me? With the opportunity, because you can turn it to 2 feature films in New Line Cinema and Miramax.
I know it's
money grubbing.
Yeah, it's bullshit. But anyway, I think that it just would have benefited from less movies and
very bloated
different director at the helm. And Peter Jackson. Well, I think Peter Jackson felt the same way when you hear interviews of him during that time. He very clearly did not want to be directing it. You see special features from The Hobbit. He clearly did not want to be there. He even said outright, I shouldn't be the one directing this. I'm only doing it because nobody else can, because Guillermo del Toro said no, and I don't trust anybody else. So essentially, he did it because he was scared that the studios, Battle of the 5 Studios, as the third movie is often called, it's because it was fought over by 5 different studios, and he was stuck in the middle and knew that if he left, that everything would go to shit, and they would probably hire some hackneyed director to do exactly what they wanted. And he couldn't do that. He couldn't let that happen. So he did his very best with it. And I admire Peter Jackson for everything that he's done. I'm sorry that he didn't get to produce the Hobbit movies that he wanted. I'm sorry that he had to direct the ones he did.
I find it interesting. So you brought up the idea that the Hobbit movies are lighter in tone and the Lord of the Rings are heavier, just like we mentioned earlier as well. But he had the idea, that Peter Jackson had the idea, that Guillermo del Toro would give it a lighter, different tone. When you look at movies of what his catalog includes, like Pan's Labyrinth, and what was it, that Shape of Water?
Maybe not lighter, but they would be I think they would become lighter simply because of how weird they are. Because of the very realness of Peter Jackson's interpretation of Lord of the Rings, bringing in somebody like Guillermo del Toro that would put a very literal kind of fantastical fairy tale vibe to it would make it lighter, simply out of the weirdness. Not necessarily lighter in tone, but just the fancifulness of it would make it seem lighter.
I respect Del Toro as a filmmaker, but the movies I've seen of him are just not my cup of tea. And so when I think about what they would have been, what the Hobbit movies would have been with him at the helm, I don't know.
Remember Peter Jackson producing. It wasn't like it was going to be so different. It was just going to be more his vision. And then
maybe it just I don't know. I'm happy Peter came back and because as you know very well about me, Graham, I don't think we've discussed this on Drunk Thoughts, High Opinions, but I'm a sucker for continuity and conformity and for instance, as much as Thor Ragnarok is a great movie, I don't like it, or I didn't like it initially because it was so tonally different than the first 2. Yeah. Thor Dark World sucked, don't get me wrong, but at least it felt like a sequel to the first one. Ragnarok does not feel like a sequel to Thor or Thor: The Dark World.
Yeah,
it feels like a whole new interpretation of the character. And Taika Waititi did a great job, and it's a very fun movie and colorful and bright, and that's great. But for me, I like the conformity, I like the continuity, and and it's definitely that age old question, like, do you sacrifice art for that? And that could be something we could have a whole episode on, that I don't think we want to bore the viewers or listeners to. But like, I'm just happy Peter came back, because it meant that world felt the same. He's the through line throughout all 6 movies. There's a sense of through line there. Guillermo del Toro, I think, would have done a good job, but I think it would have been too different. Mm-hmm. And that would have upset me the most. Personally, this is all personal stuff. This is all.
I know you've told me this your feelings about this in the past, and I'm gonna voice my thoughts on this, my opinion. Sorry, once again.
Stay in your lane, fucker.
Stay in my lane. My opinion is that if something is bad and you want it to be better, but you still want it to keep going, why would you, if you're going to break continuity, why, if you have to break continuity to make it better, then do it. It doesn't matter if the other stuff was, like, if you're trying to make it seem exactly the same. The first 2 were not working. The first 2 did not work.
Thor movies.
The first 2 Thor movies were not working. And the tone of the Marvel universe very much kind of shifted into more funny, more lighthearted, with like sentimental shit and action. Like they just
Guardians of the Galaxy being a prime example.
Exactly. Once Guardians of the Galaxy came out, it solidified like what they thought the MCU would be most successful as. So they, by the point, like that's the difference, is Thor: The Dark World came out in 2013, and then Thor Ragnarok and Guardians of the Galaxy 1 came out in 2017. Or sorry, 2014.
16 or 14.
2014. Sorry, yeah.
Sure, why not?
Something's booming in the background here.
Anyway, you're good.
Okay, so it's just a year. It's a year between Thor: The Dark World and Guardians of the Galaxy 1, and then another 3 years later, and we get Guardians of the Galaxy 2 and Thor Ragnarok. And you can very much see that in that time, that's what they shifted towards. Civil War was kind of the last film that they did that was in that kind of earlier, darker tone. Maybe there could be an argument for Infinity War and Endgame, but I even felt like those started to get a little bit more lighthearted, like the general rest of the films.
Well, that was the best thing about Infinity War and Endgame, in my opinion, is it brought everything together. Like, and that was the point, obviously, but like, you had the campiness of the Guardians, you had Cap and his seriousness, you had sarcastic Jon Favreau's Iron Man, and like all these, the amalgam of characters, and how well the Russo brothers were able to bring them all under one roof was just fantastic, and keep every character in their lane together.
Yeah,
and so yeah,
so yeah. Anyway, my argument
you have, like,
is, if something is not working, change it, and whatever you have to do to change it, it doesn't matter. And so I respectfully disagree on like having to have complete continuity between works, especially when it's part of a larger world like Thor. And in the end, there's kind of an explanation for why Thor acts the way he does in Ragnarok as opposed to Dark World. Like I always took it as because Jane is no longer there, they had a breakup, and this is kind of his coping mechanism. Is he's become very boisterous and funny and laugh out loud, comedic, and he just he doesn't care about what's going on. He's not.
I wouldn't say it's all Jane. I'd say just all the shit that he's dealt with his life, losing his brother several times, losing his dad right at the beginning of Ragnarok, and and then Jane. Have you seen Love and Thunder yet?
I have not seen Love and Thunder yet, so I don't think we should talk about that just yet.
But there's like, they fill in some of the gaps, like why they broke up.
I'm sure I've heard.
It's not much of a spoiler. Like, that she's in the movie. And so, they talk about their relationship, and you learn why they broke up and stuff. It's pretty hysterical, actually. But Funnily enough, have you heard that movie has worse Rotten Tomato score than The Dark World?
And that's very funny because like I have been complaining about the MCU for 5 years, and for the first time I find myself actually admiring the weird directions that Marvel's going. And this is when the reviews are starting to plummet. They're actually starting to do something interesting, and the people are like, no.
I've seen the movie, and I've read why why the reviews are dropping, and they're 100% right in my opinion. But anyway, let's circle back. You just said you made a good valid point regarding the Thor movie, but it doesn't quite track for The Hobbit. You said like if something's not working, then you need to, take a left turn and fix it. Well, I think you and I can, and you, myself, and everybody in the fucking world can agree that Lord of the Rings was not broken. Like there was nothing fucking wrong with Lord of the Rings or Peter Jackson's interpretation of that trilogy. So to have somebody come in and interpret The Hobbit in a different way, like Guillermo del Toro,
as I said, it's because different. they were adapting the book. They were not trying to continue originally. They weren't trying to just do a continuation of the Lord of the Rings. They adapted the books of Lord of the Rings, me. And now they're going to I don't care if
I don't care about you and your arguments either. Fuck you. You were just Fuck like, this is my argument. I'm like, all right, well, that's your argument. I have my own argument. Get fucked. Like, you have an opinion. I have a thought. Get bent.
Anyway, no, like that's I get what you mean.
What?
I get what you mean.
You don't get shit
about it not having the continuity, but the thing is, when the books are very fundamentally different in their styling and tone, but the world isn't different. The world isn't different, and the world wasn't going to be different because it was still Peter Jackson producing. It was still his world. It was just that that Guillermo del Toro was going to
in your experience, producers have so much
stuff that hadn't been
say in how the world feels.
Yes, but yeah, well, oh my god, you are such a piece of shit to talk to sometimes because you never listen. You don't listen.
Sorry, was that part of my job? Listening?
I expect it sometimes.
Yeah.
I guess I expect too much from you.
Hey, you're starting to learn. Good for you.
Anyway.
I'm
sorry Peter Jackson didn't get to produce.
I'm not.
The Hobbit movies he wanted, and
he sits in that director chair and he's gonna fucking like it.
I'm sorry he had to direct the ones he did, because have you seen some of the footage of him in the special features behind the scenes? He looks so fucking miserable.
Well,
having to do this, being thrown in last minute, knowing that if he was to try and push it back, they would fire him, and he's like, well, I just have to do this. I have to take it and run. And it's atrocious. The movie just I can't stand those Hobbit movies. I know that you'll pop them on from.
Yeah, I'm not saying they're good movies. At the end of the day, I'm not trying to fight for the quality.
The Lord of the Rings.
I just think that
I loved Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, and so I cannot stand seeing what happened with those Hobbit movies, because it feel like that's the thing is, even though it stays in continuous, it doesn't feel like it feels so off because of all the bullshit CGI and and the plotting and the extra
storylines,
characters,
unnecessary
characters, that don't tie in. Like the whole point of it, that when Peter Jackson took over as director, his decision was, okay, well, they want it to be tied together, so I'll do that. I'll tie it together. And so, but then he could have done all the tie-ins for the Lord of the Rings and still made it a fucking 12-hour, 9-hour movie. But he decided to fill up a lot of that time that he could have spent on the real characters of the book with unnecessary characters that did absolutely nothing in the book, were not there, were not mentioned, were not named, and did nothing for the plot here in the Hobbit movies, and yet filled close to 2 or 3 hours of total screen time across all three
of
films.
Just nothing.
Time, valuable time. I would say of characters that were not in the book probably take up close to 3 hours of screen time of the entire movie series of The Hobbit, not the Lord of the Rings, just The Hobbit, and it is painful to watch. I'm citing, and I would say 2 hours of that 3 hours is all in Battle of the Five Armies, with what is his fucking name?
I mean, you're gonna.
I'm sorry, I'm angry. I'm actually angry right now. What is that character's name who takes up so much fucking time and he's just unnecessary? Bard? He's like the assistant. Yeah, no, the like the assistant to the mayor.
Alfred, the sniveling douchebag.
Alfred, yeah. What point is that character? He's not in the book. He's not. He is not a part of the lore of the world, and yet he takes probably 2.5 hours
Way
of screen
more.
Time of Battle
I was texting you while watching it, saying the same thing. I was like, what purpose does this fucking douchebag serve?
Oh, I know. You were saying
we
that,
can't
and
come
I was
up with
like,
an answer. He was just a useless piece of shit character that, I mean, and now I will say Stephen Fry as the master of Lake Town being a greedy son of a bitch was kind of a nice humorous moment, but like,
look, I'm not saying there weren't good decisions
but like
made,
but that
just most of them were bad.
Wait, hold on, say that again.
I'm not saying good decisions weren't made, but most of them were bad.
That should be the slogan for this podcast.
Done. I'll contact the artist and have him put it at the
I'm not saying
bottom of the logo.
Made, but they were all bad.
Most of them were bad.
I'm gonna say all. I'm gonna make a slight adjustment to that. There's definitely a lot of fluff in those movies that was just and like as much as I love Evangeline Lilly, like and how sexy she looks as an elf, useless.
Yeah.
The love romance between her and
useless one as a character.
Was it Feely or Killy? I can't keep those two straight. Doesn't matter.
It doesn't really matter. It's the guy who went on to be Poldark, and that's all that matters.
Oh, is that right? I didn't realize that.
He's the little dwarf who sexually harasses the elf, and then they fall in love.
Well, I knew that much.
He went on to be Poldark.
Yeah. See the other brother. The other brother is a guy named something Gorman. And I saw him in another show that was really funny. And if you see this on Netflix, you should check it out. It's called The Almighty Johnsons. It is about a bunch of guys living in New Zealand, a family. It's 4 brothers living in New Zealand that are descendant from the Scandinavia. And it turns out that they are Norse gods reincarnated. But they're like lesser gods. They're not like Thor or Loki or any fun shit like that. They're like some lesser unknown bullshit gods. And so the other brother from The Hobbit he's a god of like romance. So he just like sleeps with all the women in New Zealand. But then it turns out, so there's 4 of them, and the youngest brother, who's just this like, well, he's kind of like you, just, you know, sits around, smokes weed all day and doesn't really do much with his life. Turns out he's the reincarnation of Odin. And so everybody has to bow down to him, and they're like, what now?
You know what I want to do? I think I want to make a short film about
That's nice.
It'll be very fun, and it can all be at a party. But it's about turns out Dionysus has a twin brother who is the god of weed. So they're the gods of wine and weed. But he's the lesser known brother of Dionysus. Most people just they conflated the two. There's actually they just conflated it as Dionysus. Yeah,
like
there's actually 2 of them. There's actually 2 of them. They're twins.
They're twins.
And so we all know Dionysus, of course, he's the god of wine, but they took the extra guy. I haven't named him yet, but they've taken the other guy and they've just taken all his qualities, you know, weed, partying, philosophy, and fun party talk, threw it all into there, and so Dionysus is just kind of this conglomerate of fun, like fun parties. but really it's the god of wine and having a good time, and the god of weed and having wonderful talks.
Gramercies?
Gramercies?
Can that be his name?
Let's do it.
Gramercies?
We'll do it. You'll play Dionysus. I'll play Gramercies.
Sold.
Yes.
Wait, does that mean I have to drink wine? I mean, I'll make the sacrifice.
We'll have you drink it from
a
glorious goblet. Or
Deal.
Alternative.
It's gotta be a pimp cup.
We find an actor who would be your stand-in, who would be the person who plays you.
No. I mean, wine is just. I'll drink wine. Don't get me wrong. But if you were to be like, here's wine, here's beer, here's liquor, here's wine, which one do you want to drink?
I think it would be better.
Wine will not be my first choice
because then we can do it as Drunk Thoughts and High Opinions presents this short film, and it would be in tone. It would be in tone because you would be the Greek god of drinking, and I would be the Greek god of smoking. I think that this is something we're onto something here. This is good advertisement.
You're. What are you drinking over there? You got some creative juices flowing.
I went to a new weed store because, as audiences might notice, I'm in a new location. I moved about a week and a half ago, and while exploring the great unknown of my new area, I immediately went to the local cannabis store called Inspired Cannabis Co. in Abbotsford. Yeah,
is that company?
I guess it's corporation. I don't know. It's just CO. Could be cock. But Inspired Cannabis in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Canada. Wonderful place, lovely staff. The guy who helped me was probably between 65 and 75. Old school guy. Very pleasant. First thing that I asked him when I went there, I was like, "Hey, how's your day going?" And he's like, "My day is excellent. My days are always good when I just have nothing but happy customers."
Did you get served by Willie Nelson?
Maybe. He was far too young to be Willie Nelson. Had too tall of a beer belly. But it could have been Willie Nelson in disguise.
Have you seen Willie Nelson lately?
It's like 100 years old, man. Anyway, I went.
Still kicking though, man. Yeah. That weed made him immortal.
Honestly, I think he and Snoop Dogg are onto something. So that's why I follow in their footsteps. Anyway, I picked up a few good things. As people just saw, I took a little puff of a indica called Sunset Sherbet from Broken Coast.
Sherbet?
It's sherbet.
Is that what you meant to say?
There's no R. It's sherbet.
Sherbet?
Sherbet? No, people call it sherbet, but it's sherbet. Sherbet. The R is ghosted, like in music. So the
that R was like, I'm out of here, bitches.
The drink that I'm having is called a Quattro, and it is passion fruit and guava with CBD. Ooh. So it's not really like THC. I'm not getting high from this, but it's a really good balance with. Really good balance with the strong weed that I picked up, which I'm already feeling that one puff I took, and I'm using just a little baby bitch one hitter because I don't want to create too much smoke in here,
What about you? How you've been this past week?
I've been good. I've been just kind of, I moved into my new place. So I've just kind of been like getting new furniture, filling out the place, making it my own, It's the first time I've ever furnished my own apartment, So that's kind of you've done that before, like, fill out an apartment with your own furniture and your own stuff and from scratch, basically. There's
Goodwill, buddy. Value Village.
Exactly. So, I've just kind of been doing that, chilling, watching shows. I've been binging hard Better Call Saul. Because I want to catch up in time for the finale, the series finale, which is coming up in the next week or so.
I was gonna say, I thought that was like this week or next week.
Yeah. So I've got about 18 18 episodes left or so.
Jesus.
I've got 5 more in season 5, and then I've got 13, the final 13 of season 6.
Like the current season.
Yeah, yeah. By the time I get to it, the 12th episode of season 6 will have released. Excuse me. And so as soon as that is out, I will watch that. Obviously.
I was gonna say, like, what are you gonna stop after the no, fuck the 12th episode. I've watched 11. I'm done with this story. Peace out, fuckers.
By the time I'm caught up, that will have released, so I'll just be able to watch that in concurrence, and then I'll just be waiting the last probably few days for the final episode. So I think we'll talk a little bit more about it once we're at the end. But I wanted to touch just a little bit on, since we were already talking about the MCU and
what are you touching?
I'm touching film franchises. I'm touching them where they need to be touched. Not in a bad way. Don't take it like that. I'm not saying
show us on the doll where they touched, where Graham touched you. Don't be shy, MCU. Tell us where Graham touched you.
We've talked about MCU and the DCEU and you know, like big franchises that get bigger and bigger and bigger, and some that just fuck up, like the DCEU. And I wanted to talk about the Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul universe, because at this point I would consider
the
that
Gilliverse.
To be, yeah, the Gilliverse, exactly. The Goldverse, the Goldenverse. There we go.
I had a good joke and you ruined it. Move on.
Fuck you. And
salud.
Breaking Bad obviously was a fantastic show. It still is. Better Call Saul is one of those shows. It's because it is such a perfect homage and prequel to Breaking Bad. It almost you're elevated in thinking of how good it is, because I'm amazed by how it's able to be as good as it is. By still calling back to Breaking Bad basically every single episode. Like, it's literally just more Breaking Bad at this point, while never truly being Breaking Bad. It is its own show. It constantly is paying homage to what came before and what they did before, while never truly stealing or taking over or making Breaking Bad the centerpiece.
It feels like it's set in that world.
Exactly. It's set in the world.
How do you like that for a tie-in?
Yeah, it's set in that world. It feels like it's part of Breaking Bad, but it's also its own story about so many different characters and has its own footprint. And so I'm so excited to see what they do in the finale. Running theory right now, having only seen up to midway through season 5, is that since there was 62 episodes of Breaking Bad and there's projected to be 63 episodes of Better Call Saul, that the 63rd episode is going to take place entirely in the future, what we've been seeing at the beginning of seasons in the black and white future of in front of Breaking Bad.
The stuff that took place ahead, after that. Yeah.
Exactly.
I hear you. No, that's a solid theory.
Then they would do literally it's like a almost they're exactly the same length. Obviously not by seasons, but by hourly length. So if they did that, because there was 5 seasons of Breaking Bad, but it had 62 episodes. This has 6 seasons and 63. Mm-hmm. So they just paced it differently, but they're still going to have about the same amount of episodes.
Same amount of content, yeah.
If they're doing that, just a little theory. I'd like to think that maybe they're going to do like 60-second episode is going to be like Breaking Bad's finale. You know, the end of the Better Call Saul story, but the 63rd episode will be like the wrapping up what's been happening in the future, while also giving kind of an end to a further end to Breaking Bad, and the El Camino story as well, wrapping those all up as well.
See, I've watched all the way up through season 5. I just haven't seen the latest season, so I don't know where they're going with that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's going to be a continuation of El Camino or Breaking Bad, but I think it's going to give us a more. I mean, obviously, it's going to give us a more definitive end to the character of Saul Goodman.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering what that ending is going to be. I'm kind of, just genuinely curious. I like the idea. I definitely subscribe to your theory of giving the 63rd episode being a totally independent final story of
like an epilogue, like an epilogue,
like a full
everything.
epilogue to an episode. Yeah.
Instead of just doing like
tie into El Camino, maybe
instead of doing like a 20-minute like end to one episode, to their final episode, I think they're just gonna do a full epilogue episode.
Yeah, that tracks.
So, and that's because I've heard people asking like where are Walt and Jesse, meaning that people knew they were going to be coming back, but it's taken several episodes for them to show up. So my guess is that they've been
this past week.
They finally showed up.
Yeah, this past the episode I think that just recently aired or is about to air.
They finally showed up.
They've announced that the title of the episode is Breaking Bad.
Oh, okay. So
I'm pretty confident.
Oh, I wonder. It would be interesting because the episode that introduced Better Call Saul or Saul Goodman in Breaking Bad was called Better Call Saul. If the episode that they're about to release is called Breaking Bad, what if it's the reverse of that episode? Yeah. Where
the timelines meet.
It's his version.
Season 2.
Yeah, it's his version of that episode.
Two, yeah. That season 2 episode when they run into Saul.
I think that would be awesome. I think that would be really
cool. That would be good. Yeah, it's a really well done prequel and a lot of nice callbacks and like watching this guy go down this road to become the character that we all know, this kind of slimy two-faced lawyer, but was an upstanding guy at one point. It's very, very well done, and I totally agree. The only, it just like any other prequel, my only beef is it's like, well, we kind of know how it ends.
Yeah,
which is upsetting because like you have such great characters. Like Chuck was a great character, and the girl,
Kim Wexler.
Kim
is wonderful. I really
and that's what I'm like. That's what I'm saying. She's wonderful, but it's like she wasn't in Breaking Bad. So what are they going to do with her?
That's why I think they're going to jump forward into the past Breaking Bad timeline. That's why they've been building to it the entire time. I think that's the black and white sequences at the beginning of each season, and sometimes like they'll give a little snippet at the end. That's building up to the final episode. I think that's what the final episode is going to be.
And you think Kim will be in that?
I think so. That's actually a running theory that I recently heard, separate from what I had this theory on my own, then read, oh, apparently this is what people think, is that she took the same vacuum cleaner service that Walt and Saul did at the end of Breaking Bad, and Jesse as well, that she took that service, and Saul at the end of season 6 of Better Call Saul, or close to the end of it, at the climax basically, is going to be faced with the same dilemma of, do I take this? And he's going to say no, and Kim is going to go instead. And I think that the end of, because so far what I've seen, I haven't seen the beginning of season 6's like flash forward into the black and white section, so I don't know, but the last thing I saw was that he canceled his extraction appointment. His appointment, he canceled it and said, I will handle this on my own, implying that he's probably going to go fucking kill this guy who made him. So my guess based off of that is that Jimmy McGill, Saul Goodman, is going to take care of that guy, or realize that he just can't bring himself to do it, and he is going to skip town on his own, go somewhere else, and he is going to, and I bet he's been like searching for her, and he's just going to go to her. And the end of the series is going to be him finding her, and I don't think it's going to be a happy ending. I don't think it's going to be like we found each other happily ever after. It's going to be some sort of situation of like she she hates him now, or she's married, met somebody else. It is supposed to be.
What if she kills him?
Yeah, what if, like, literally, what if he shows up at her place and says, "Hey, Kim," and she just straight up shoots him? That would be that would honestly be a shocking and amazing ending to the series. I would not if
just Game of Thrones that shit.
Yeah, if that was the end of the series, I would kind of love that. Actually, I think that would be brilliant.
Rhea Seehorn is just amazing, and she actually directed a few episodes.
It's actually pronounced Ray. Yeah.
My apologies.
I thought it was Reddit. I thought it was Rhea as well.
It's spelled Rhea, so you can be forgiven for assuming that. But Ray Seehorn is she directed a few of the episodes in season 6 too, so that's always nice. Look at that little oney; it's so cute. I remember my first hit. Hold it! Oh no! I don't want to generate smoke in my apartment.
It's much less than the bong would.
Yeah,
trust me. Anyway, yeah, here.
What are you doing?
Easiest way to clear out the bad boy. Anyway, yeah, I always like it when a show has an actor who's been there since the beginning or there for a long time direct an episode, because it usually leads to something good later on.
They've been around. They know what works and what doesn't.
And
directors are usually a kind of a rotating door when it comes to long-running TV shows. They come in for 2 weeks, they direct an episode, they leave. But an actor who's been there, they know these characters because they are these characters.
The showrunner, and because they know then the showrunners trust them a little bit more to say, like, hey, try something. If you want to try something, I trust you. You know the world. Go ahead. And many times I'm going to cite my sources, but there's many cases of actors on shows, especially comedies, sometimes on dramas, but often on comedies, actors who would direct an episode or a few episodes of a show and then have gone on to become well known for directing, like John Krasinski on The Office. He directed. The first thing he ever did was direct an episode in season 6 of The Office, and then he went on to direct about 2 or 3 more, I think. And those episodes actually stand out. He tried something a little different, but he stayed within the realm of the Office.
Well, you can't really.
Then he went off and did his own stuff, but he had that kind of film school experience. He's described it as being in the Office was like going to film school, and I totally understand that based off of their stories. And like, honestly, that's what a film school should be, is like a professional showrunner bringing in somewhat educated, like,
well, don't give it all away. We're still working on something here. Don't tell the viewers everything. We can't give away our $1 million idea.
Yeah, exactly. But
I agree with you. Like, they're especially because when it comes to a TV show and a long running TV show like The Office or Better Call Saul, it's like you can only do so much with those characters. So give it to somebody who knows those characters and can do something unique and different with them because they've lived that life for so many years versus Joe Schmo director who's just the flavor of the week for that episode. I loved hearing about the DC shows over there on the CW, and they like for the Flash, Danielle Panabaker, who played Caitlin Snow, she directed a bunch of episodes, and David Ramsey and who was on Arrow as John Diggle, he's directed a few.
And I bet you in many of those cases these actors are going to start getting a lot more work directing. They're known as actors, and when a known actor or an actor with a name that is recognizable starts to direct, then studios more likely want to hire them to direct because but they want to hire that name because that name looks good on the front of that episode.
I always loved hearing.
I know that name.
I always loved listening to Kevin Smith talk about directing like Flash or Supergirl and describing that process because he's like,
that's what got me into Hollywood Babylon.
I believe it.
That episode. I
love listening because he goes,
talked about. Yeah.
You go up there and you're directing this episode technically on paper, but like it kind of directs itself because it's like you can't do a whole lot. Like, here's a boy who solves his problems by running fast. it's not like you can tell him
Okay.
like, okay, you're not going to run fast this week, because it's like, well, the show's called The Flash, so he's going to run fast. Like
Yeah.
that's what he's going to fucking do. Or
Yeah.
you know, you got a show of Supergirl. It's like, well, you know, what do I know about being a girl who's super? Like, I don't know shit. So I was just like, you know what, Melissa, go for it. You got this, girl.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, that, like, honestly, Kevin Smith talking about, there was an episode back in, I think, 2016, or early 2016, that where he was talking about directing, because it was when he first was brought up to direct The Flash, and it was Hollywood Babylon, and he spent a good 40 minutes just talking about everything that he did for the first episode that he did directing that. And it was the first time that I realized, oh, TV directors don't do anything. And I realized why. Because it all of a sudden just made sense. He didn't have to really explain it. I just all of a sudden was like, wait, TV directors don't do anything. And I realized why, because then if every director came in and tried to do their own thing, TV shows would be all over the fucking place and it wouldn't work.
no shit.
So there has to be one person at the top. And what I've realized recently is that a lot of shows usually will have, while there's usually the head showrunner is the writer, there's also usually an executive producer, director, who their job is kind of the overarching director, whereas the showrunner will usually be the overarching writer. So in the case of The Good Place, Michael Schur was the writer, showrunner, and I am just blanking on his name. The man, he created Daredevil. He did the Daredevil 2015 show on Netflix.
Oh yeah, I know you're talking about.
And numerous other projects, Cabin in the Woods, and he did that Bad Times at the El Royale. We just talked about him a few weeks ago. But he was the directing executive producer of The Good Place.
Drew Goddard?
So he directed Drew Goddard. Yeah, thank you very much. Drew Goddard directed the first episode of The Good Place, and then for basically the rest of the series, he stood by as like the overarching director. Every time a director would come in, he would brief them on what type of camera work they would do. He would give them the spiel on everything that was required, but then would leave them to their devices. Like, you can work within these parameters.
Yeah, it's always interesting to direct a pilot. I mean, you and I had a taste of that when we produced The Bureau, of like, how do we get a show that feels contiguous from one episode to the next, especially when you had two very different directors with Dylan and Nelda.
Yeah.
I mean, God bless them both, both wonderful individuals, but they, you know, were definitely on two different wavelengths creatively, and trying to get them in sync was a challenge, to say the least. But
yeah, absolutely. and that's the thing is, I think that was the biggest problem, is that most of the time, I think this is something that VFS, or Vancouver Film School, got wrong, is that most of the time those directors on those shows are not collaborating. There is an overarching director, like I just said with like Drew Goddard. He is the one, or in this case in The Bureau, since Dylan was the director of the first episode, he would have been considered the overarching director and the executive producer.
Don't tell him
director,
that,
so to speak. And I know, I'm not gonna. We're probably gonna cut this just so that he doesn't know, because then he'll try and take over.
Take over what? We shot it 2 years ago, and it's probably been seen by like 5 people. Fuck it. But I mean, but I will, you know, but kudos to them for figuring it out, and you know, and I think that speaks, you know, to a lot of directors who direct TV, is like, you come in, you're given like a kind of a world to play in, but you got a little bit of boundaries, and you get creative within that world. And I think both of them did a great job doing that.
Absolutely.
And I almost wonder, I had this thought. I was watching some of the Bureau recently, and I remember just the struggle to get them on the same wavelength. Thankfully, you and I being on the same wavelength for a lot of things really helped, you know, kind of pave the way. You know, it wasn't like you were producing and I was producing. It was, we were producing together. But I almost wonder if that was the point of the exercise. If VFS, because, you know, we all had to like interview and apply for the position we wanted and pitch and stuff like that. I almost wonder if the instructors like chose two unique and different directors on purpose to challenge the crew, the cast and the crew to find a happy medium. Like, you couldn't find more polar opposites than Dylan Warner and Nelda Amager, because, like, again, they're wonderful individuals, and I respect them both, and I haven't heard from Dylan in a while, and I hope he's doing well. But Nelda and I just talked to her last week. I hope she's doing well, but like, you wouldn't find two more polar opposites. So I wonder if they kind of purposefully chose two different visions, so that they kind of forced us to and us as an entire cast and crew to find the happy medium, because that's how it is. Like, you're not always going to find
think so.
Two people will always gel together. You're going to find people with opposing opinions and thoughts and creative suggestions. And so working within those confines and finding happy mediums is just part of the world. So I wonder if they did that on purpose to challenge us.
I feel like it's a possibility. I don't think that they were thinking about it in such nuanced terms.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. I think that they set out to do exactly what they wanted. They took the pitches that they liked the most for each episode, the people who seemed to put in the most work, and then thought amongst themselves and said, I think that these people would be better for like this role. Like, he looked at you and I literally, and I fault myself for this. They asked me, if you weren't director, what do you think you'd be good as? And I was like, I think I'd be very good at producing. And they said, and who do you think it would be a good partner for you? And I was like, oh, well, Cory and I are like we naturally work well together. And I think that, either episode that he and I were on, we would just co-produce. And they were like, very cool, very cool. And I think that's the reason, is because what I said there they said they need to be the producers, and then we're like, okay, we're not going to have them direct, we're going to have them produce. Now let's figure out who's directing. I think that you and I were their first decisions for producing. They were like, this is where we're going. Because I think because they already knew that you and I worked really well together. And when I said that, they were like, I think that he realizes as well. And they knew where everybody else would go from there. It just so happened that Dylan and Nelda were such polar opposites for that project.
Maybe. I could see it happening that way. I'm not going to disagree with you. I think, I'm not going to, I don't know. That feels very like self-centered though, to be like, or narcissistic to think, oh, they chose Dylan or Cory and Grant first. I don't know. I almost feel like, because they asked me the same question. I think they did that for a lot of people. They asked like, all right, well, if you can't direct, what do you want to do? Well, I want to produce. Okay, well then, and if you can't do this, they asked me the same questions that you did. And
well, I think that they knew that they wanted you to produce. I think that they knew that early on, that they wanted you to produce, even though you were pitching to direct. And as soon as they knew that you and I jived well, they were like, I think that this would be a good pairing, because you and I both said that we would work well together as producers. And so they were like, I think that helped them make the decision very quickly.
I definitely think
maybe we weren't
not the first, but
they made that decision quickly.
I agree with that. That maybe they decided, okay, let's have Dylan do one episode and Nelda do another episode, and then it's like, okay, who's going to be producing? And it's like, well, then maybe they made that decision. Who knows? But so who, it's all, this is all speculation and just pure bullshit that we're tossing out there. But regardless, if you're interested in watching The Bureau, we'll include in the link to this.
Yeah, we should throw up a link to that.
Yeah, what right. Just sitting there on YouTube.
Drunk Thoughts and High Opinions presents The Bureau.
The Bureau. Totally free. 2 episodes on YouTube, folks.
We'll change the
VFS presents
the
DTH show.
We'll change it. But we'll also change the credits so it says starring Graham Stepniewski, just for that one part where I'm just like collapsing in the background of the shot. Yeah.
That's all you do, and it's amazing.
One of my finest acting moments. Actually, no, you haven't seen my newest film.
No, sir. Your finest acting is in the Bureau special features of the ADR mockumentary, where you play Scott Michaels, the world's greatest producer.
We should put up links to
it's all in the same channel. It's super easy. I have it all on YouTube.
It's all in the same channel.
I watch that every once in a while when I'm like, you know what? Like whenever I'm feeling like, maybe I'm not such a great director, or maybe I don't know how to make something funny. I watch that, and that is hysterical. That mockumentary, that's the
automatic dick regeneration.
Automatic donkey wranglers. Wranglers is spelled with a W. It could be.
It could be.
I find that so hysterical.
No, it's not the it could be that does it for me. It was Dylan's.
The consideration, like he thinks about it.
He really thought about it. He really thought about it. It's my favorite Dylan moment of all time.
I would say that tracks. But I watch that all the time. So for those who don't know, that is a behind the scenes making of where we did a little documentary discussing the ADR process of the Bureau, which is the replacing of dialogue, usually on film sets.
Yeah,
if you're on film sets,
if you're shooting a film, you're always going to have some like sound in the background or the quality of the microphone.
Usually it's wind or some shit that ruins takes.
So almost always wind, but sometimes you'll have like a big truck
or at my work. My work, we film on a production
usually
floor, a robotic manufacturing production floor. So there's machines running, or the worst is the fucking forklift. We'll have a guy be like, "Hi, I'm so and so with so and so." No, it's just the forklift. Whenever they move, they honk to let everybody know where they're at. And they go, meow, meow. So it's just, hi, I'm so and so from.
Oh, right. Okay.
Jesus Christ.
I was remembering the old ass forklifts that we used to have on my parents' ranch that were just so old and would just sound like fucking cows having anal sex,
you listen to that a lot, Graham,
as they rounded corners. Sometimes you can't get away from
some
it.
Weird shit.
Anyway, so ADR, as we said, so you just gotta replace dialogue sometimes in film. It's just a fact of nature. I mean, there was a point in film history where some filmmakers thought it was just easier to replace all dialogue in post, and there are more films.
The average Hollywood film that is 70% fake audio.
Yeah, and
Star Wars, all the prequels
that are 100% ADR, all ADR. Yeah, the entire prequels trilogy of the Star Wars, every single line
had very noisy lenses
with ADR. So very noisy.
What this hand gesture is, but I'm
also very noisy. Yeah, I'd ask you to please stop because it's making me uncomfortable. But yeah, they had noisy lenses and
it was just a bad
studios.
Movie, so. But anyway.
And it was they were just bad movies. Yeah, so we'll not go down that rabbit hole again. But yeah, so ADR, obviously you have to talk about it sometimes, and nobody knows what ADR actually stands for.
Let's not ruin the moment. We'll ruin the moment.
Even now, I'm forgetting.
But we made a documentary that discussed what ADR is and what it stands for and how it applies to films. So we'll put the link to that video in the description of this video. So go check that out, as well as the Bureau that Graham and I was our first co-produced project at Vancouver Film School.
Yeah. It's what brought us together. It's why you're watching this podcast
I fucking drink
right
as much
now,
as I do.
Or if you're listening, that's why you're listening. It's why you fucking drink as much as you do.
Definitely. But we are going a little long in the tooth, so why don't we
are getting a little long here. I feel I'm gonna cut a lot of this down. So yeah, I agree with you. Let's wrap this up. Anyway, you can what Cory, where can we find you outside of drinking and bars and known places of alcohol?
Drinking in my apartment, like I do.
That was implied. Where else can we find you? Where do you work? What is
same
your,
thing I do every night,
major
Pinky.
Malfunction?
Try and take over the world.
What sort of work do you do?
Do you know Pinky in the Brain? Do you even know that one?
I don't.
I just died a little on the inside.
Yeah, well,
they're Pinky and the brain.
But remember, not only I also seem a little younger than I actually am because my family was firmly in the 90s, as we've established, until 2004.
Animaniacs was 90s.
we were strictly in the 90s until 2004, but we didn't have any television.
Yeah, all right.
So I wasn't able to watch any television.
All right,
so
well then that's your homework.
No.
Homework. Go watch episodes of Animaniacs. It is like one of the most ridiculous shows that Warner Brothers ever put out. And it's dirty and it's hilarious. And it has two characters called Pinky and the Brain, and they always finish it out. What are you going to do tonight, Brain? The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try and take over the world. And he's voiced after Orson Welles. Like that's the impression.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've heard that sequence before, but I don't feel like I'm gonna.
And you can listen to the Lake Titicaca song. Lake Titicaca, Lake Titicaca, Lake Titicaca, between Bolivia and Peru. Lake Titicaca, and you know they just recorded it just so they could say the words Titicaca on a kids show.
What is your website, Cory?
My website is way too goddamn long to say on a podcast, but if you're interested in finding it, you can hit me up on like Facebook or Instagram at Rokesy ROKESYBOY, and then you can find my website because it's one of those unpaid bullshit Wix sites, so it has a long ass URL. Let's see, CD Rokes, so that's Charlie Delta Rokes at cdrokes.wixsite.com//Cory Rokes. It's too fucking long. Find me on social media. Hit me up somewhere, and I'll direct you to it.
Cool. And you can always find me at outrageous creation _ in the middle of those two words right there on Instagram. And I am currently building my website, but it's going to be up and running soon. mad-musings.com, mad-musings.com. And you'll be able to find my short stories and my propaganda on there.
It just says coming soon.
Yep.
I want to read your
Coming
musings.
soon.
It'll include my short stories and a lot of my propaganda.
Propaganda. Who are you trying to inspire? Jesus.
I consider Equal Time to be propaganda.
What?
It's like the most subtle propaganda of all time. Even you don't know what it is.
I don't even know if you know what Equal Time is half the time.
That's how you know it's a good story. All right. Good night, Cory.
Cheers, everybody? Question mark, I guess.
Cheers, everybody.